What's up, everyone? This is Ryan here, and I just wanted to do one final reflections video for the end of this year. So this reflections video in particular is mostly directed towards people who have a great deal of trouble uprooting or not engaging in habit structures. So let me give you an example. And now what I mean by this is we're talking about habit structures which you would either not have at all, or at least, really taper down, really get to a level where it's not necessarily the thing you spend your entire day doing. And I would like you to think of everything I say here on like a day-to-day sort of time scale. So up on the board I have a statement: control your inputs and you'll control your outputs. And this particular reflection is directed towards people who are very analytical, who like to use their sort of decisive, decision-making, discursive, examinatory mind to basically try and solve every problem, which is something I certainly can relate to. And what I wanted to talk about today is a more subtle way of basically encouraging good habits and discouraging negative habits, giving momentum to the positive habits and ideas, and taking momentum away from the negative habits and ideas. So when I was kind of first starting to ask myself the question, I think this happened when I was around 18, how best should I use my time, knowing that I'm about to die at some point? What should I spend most of my day-to-day conscious experience doing? And I knew enough by the fact that I was unhappy almost all the time back then that something wasn't right, but I didn't know how to get out of that cycle of negative habits and thoughts. That momentum was so strong from my upbringing that it kind of felt hopeless, to be honest. I felt like what I wanted for myself and what I did every day just really weren't congruent to each other. I would imagine myself as being this person who would wake up on time every day and work hard every day and eventually be able to go traveling and enjoy the fruits of excessive hard work. And the problem was, I was working a job I didn't like, and the only tool I had for dealing with my depression at the time, unfortunately, were habits which kind of made the depression worse. So in these reflections videos and the videos I made talking about social anxiety and how to kind of rewire your social difficulties, I tended to talk about quite specific things a person could do, or very specific beliefs I had that need to be killed. Kill it with fire. Like, as just for a moment, one example is when I was around the age of 15, I actually consciously held the belief, created the belief that to be happy was to be stupid. which is not only ironically a very stupid idea, but I was basically like using my intellectual mind to pretty much push away the desire to be in a good mood. It was very quite bizarre. So I when I moved out at the age of 17, I all of a sudden I was kind of left alone. I didn't have a lot of the negative influences I had from home. I didn't have issues in school, really. No one was really big enough to bother me. But certainly at home there was just a lot of drama and negativity and arrested development. And so when I moved out on my own, all of a sudden I was in a position where I basically was able to control my inputs and my outputs at will. So what I mean by that is that what do you spend most of your day doing? So at around the age of 18, if I wasn't working my job that I hated, I was playing video games, and those were my primary two inputs. The food I was eating was terrible. For outputs, I was doing a little bit of exercise, but I was going about it the wrong way. And over the span of many years, I realized that the one thing I did do during that entire process, and which I try to do every day now, is to leverage my stimulus addiction of like watching YouTube or even playing video games, to actually leverage those periods, which normally are quite negative inputs. Normally, I used to watch just garbage on YouTube, just, top 10 funniest this thing, and just stuff that I'll never really think about again, or maybe, once in the future I'll watch the video again, and because I've already seen it, it'll be like less entertaining. Over the years, I've basically stopped. I still watch it on occasion, but for the most part, I've stopped paying any attention to that kind of stuff, and so I'm still very addicted to YouTube. But what I do instead is I spend a great majority of my time putting inputs into my brain which actually cultivate and encourage good ideas, good habit structures. So what I'm saying here is, if you're really caught in a place where you can't uproot your negative habit structures, so let me give you a practical example. When I was 18, on a day off, what I wanted to do was put effort into things that made me a better person, to like study and exercise and learn how to be social, get over my social retardation and things like that. And instead what I would do is I would spend literally the whole day playing video games back then. If I contrast that with where I'm at now, I still have an enormous way to go, but whereas before I would typically play video games upwards of 12 hours a day, I might on occasion spend as much time as like 12 hours a week playing video games. Maybe an hour or two every other day or something like that. It's not something which dictates my entire existence. It's no longer a habit structure which just completely prevents me from putting effort into the things which are beneficial to me. And one of the ways, the more subtle means that I use to do this is and I didn't even, use it so deliberately back then, and it sounds very simple, is that just every day, especially on the days where my inner narrator was very negative, where I had a lot of negative thoughts, I would put on talks or content from my teachers. And this is the real key point here, and I think this is what may end up hopefully kind of helping the human race drastically with the internet, is that I am a product of the internet. Over time, I learned to use my addiction, my stimulus addiction to the internet, as a means of constantly listening to teachers who had qualities or habits or ideas which I wanted to emulate. I wanted to be the David Goggins and the Jocko Willink, get up at 4:30 every day and exercise every day and just kill it. Or I wanted to be like my favorite teacher, Richard Feynman. I wanted to be a teacher who could explain the most complicated things in simple analogies and terms. Well, as simple as possible. And to be entertaining at the same time. I wanted to be, just an incredibly rigorous and talented software developer. I wanted to master software architecture. I wanted to, fix my body and, gain muscle while losing fat. I wanted to eat healthy all the time. I wanted to eat food that was healthy, that also was tasty. So before, what I would do is, when I was just in the mood for it, I would kind of put on I'd put on a Joe Rogan Experiment with David Goggins, or maybe I would read, this is among my most favorite books of all time, which isn't really a book, it's just a collection of reflections. Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. I would read this, and it would really inspire me and basically tell me, stop getting annoyed about what people say to you, people who don't matter, people who do matter. Like, don't let it bother you. Work hard, stop complaining, focus on helping people, those kinds of things. Or it might be like listening to or reading ancient Norse stories, which talk about valiance and dying in battle, and dying for what you believe in, and living a life such that your influence will be positive. Influence basically being the afterlife, essentially, what people think of you after you're dead. Those sorts of things, or listening to Sam Harris describe some of the most interesting philosophical points of existence, or like, for example, reading Richard Feynman's collections of letters, which is probably the best book I've ever read. If I could pick any one book, it would probably be that. So what I'm pointing to here is that one of the ways of rewiring your brain and enforcing positive habit structures and ideas and beliefs is to spend at least a little bit of time every day putting some kind of influence in your head. So what I used to be used to doing is almost every day, say back when I was 18, I spent like 12 to 16 hours a day just playing video games. And that was my only, and I hated it, but that was just my only coping mechanism. Or I would spend hours on top of hours watching just random YouTube stuff. Something which is really easy to do, all of you can do this, is if you don't pick up any new resolution this year, and I kind of make a joke of New Year's resolutions, because if you have to wait for a particular date to start your new habits, your success rate is already lower because you're trying to guarantee that hopefully on that particular day, tomorrow for example, it's the 31st of December, that you'll just magically snap into being a different person than you are now. But as opposed to doing that, something which you do have some control over is control your inputs. Even on your days where you fall apart, where you sleep in, your brain's messed up, all you can do is play some video games or watch some stupid stuff on YouTube. At least once a day, find some teachers, find some books, some content that you enjoy, that speaks to you, and listen to it. And this is especially important when you're at your worst, when you have really negative self-talk. I'm this, I'm useless, I'm lazy, I'm all these things. And like I would wake up on a particular, so for example, back when I was 18, I had no idea that I basically don't really especially have the ability to metabolize sugar. So for me, if I eat sugar, I really can't explain to you how much dumber it makes me. People think I'm like, people say like, just have a cookie, it won't bother you. You really don't even know. Now, your things might be different, but so I would do something like I'd eat a whole box of cookies and then wake up next day like with some aspirations. Well, tomorrow I'm going to work hard. And yet I would be basically like brutally hungover because I don't know why, I just don't really metabolize sugar. I might have diabetes, to be honest. So I'd wake up feeling like absolute shit, like 1 out of 10. And then I would get angry with myself. I'd be like, you're useless, you can't do what you want to do, you're lazy, the negative inner self-talk. So when your mind is in that negative of a state, when all you can say about yourself is negative things, then my advice to you is use your habit structures to change your input, to kind of override your input. Put on something inspirational, and you will have to make effort to find things which really speak to you. So for example, if I'm feeling lazy, I'll put on David Goggins' Joe Rogan Experiment interviews, or just Jocko Willink, or people who like work hard and kill it every day. I'll make it a mission to spend at least like an hour listening to these people. And here's a tip: if you're addicted to video games, don't play, like, pick a video game which you can play alone that doesn't require a huge amount of focus. Like, don't do like a super intense strategy game, but play your game, play out your addiction habit. Let yourself do that. That's what you want to do. Just let that habit go. You can't really stop it in the moment. But then play some audio. Play the David Goggins stuff or whatever you want. And you don't even necessarily have to listen to it closely. Try to listen to it while you're busy gaming away. But what I'm saying here is, even when you're at your worst and you're in the middle of carrying out your negative habit structure, or even not negative, but just your daily habit structures, find a way to work in positive inputs. And this is really the whole focus of what I'm rambling about here, is every day it's actually really easy. Like, all you have, I'm gonna speak to myself now, and this may not apply to you, but it might also apply to you if you're similarly wired to me. But listen, you spend like 12 to 16 fucking hours a day playing video games. You can put on an audiobook or a podcast or something while you're doing that gaming. Like, you seriously can. And it requires no extra effort, and you still get to play the video games. So don't fall into that. I don't want to do that. Another thing that can happen is we can feel very guilty when we're during our worst days. We can kind of do this self-loathing. Oh, the world sucks. Let's just, fine, do your habit, and kind of just like a really self-loathing, negative day. And then we can, when we want to like put on those positive influences, we can feel guilty, almost like we don't want to face up to those more positive influences. And that's actually like the most important time when you're at your worst, is to listen to these more positive influences. Because if you're like me, when you're in a negative mood, your mind is constantly chattering endlessly. And so the positive influence, even if it's not going to change you entirely as a person in the moment, you're still putting in some positive inputs. You're still putting coins in the piggy bank. And it's easy. Like, literally, you can do it while you're engaging in your stupid habit. I'm speaking to myself here. And just for the record, I do play a little bit of video games, maybe like an hour or two every other day when I'm tired of coding. So I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you're addicted to video games or whatever. I'm just saying, if you're like I used to be and you're spending 12 to 16 hours a day doing that, and you're letting everything else in your life deteriorate, probably you want to scale that back. This is an easy way to do it, is to just try to spend time every day at least getting another voice in your head that isn't your negative self-talk. So something which I'll do, I do this almost every day now, is let's say if I'm going for a walk, or I'm, it's the end of the day and I've already spent 8 to 12 hours working hard on my goals, then I'll allow myself for an hour or two in the evening to play some video game. And while I'm playing that video game, I'll be, depending on what quality I want to encourage, I'll play a podcast, play a video in the side, get that positive input, and just keep putting coins in the piggy bank that way. This is a more subtle way of kind of influencing who you are. Because when I was starting out on my self-development journey, the picture I had in my head is that suddenly one day I would have some big realization, and then my whole world would change, and then I would never waste time again, and I would only ever spend time on productive things. It never happened. In fact, just over a period of like 5 years, I gradually put effort and encouraged positive habit structures until they really, as opposed to thinking about, I want to play video games, 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 maybe I should also get some work done. That was like the negative thing. Now my brain is like, let's get the work done, get the work done, get the work done, get the work done. And then I kind of have to say, okay, time to relax now. You actually need to spend an hour at the end of today doing something stupid or just relaxing. Like, you actually need to take the foot off the gas. So depending on what you want to encourage, find some external influence from someone you respect, from someone who embodies characteristics and habits and beliefs that you respect. And don't even worry about paying close attention to what they're saying. Just, engage in your habit. If you can't just sit in a chair and listen to them talk, do something that's kind of simple and not too mentally taxing. And use that as part of a practice instead of it just being an entirely wasteful period. And what you may find over time is that just on words of encouragement from your teachers, your mentors, your role models, over time their ideas will kind of start to leach into your brain. And encourage and cultivate the things which will lead to more lasting contentment and progress. So I think I've rambled for long enough, and I don't feel like that was a particularly useful or concrete discussion, but hopefully with any luck there was some nuggets of wisdom in there. Thank you for watching. Happy New Year, if you happen to observe Western New Year. Gregorian calendar New Year. If not, you'll have to wait until the Chinese New Year to watch this video, and then you can watch it at that point. So, peace out.